Hey, we are back from our break. I hope you all got a sunshine break during this time on this Saturday. We are going to start our next session, which is actually writing. The writing section, some people get this confused with the essay. It's not the optional essay, it's actually the writing section that has the grammar and the and punctuation, as well as those organization questions, which I call molasses questions, but we'll jump right in. Okay, so during this section, you will have grammar, logic, and organization, and you'll understand what those mean. The writing scoring is similar to the reading, and when we do reading, I'll explain how to go from your raw score, test score, and then to your scale score so that you understand what that means. Right now, you can see that there are 44 questions in the section, so that's how many you can actually get. But each raw score has its own test score, and we'll go over that because it's actually going to be converted into a scale score. Writing has two different kinds of questions, okay? There are grammar questions, okay? And we're used to seeing these where you actually are asked to revise the ineffectiveness of a sentence or to actually determine whether there's an appropriate word or something, okay? So here you actually have short passage that you can actually see there's an underlined portion there for you to actually change. And if there is no change, and you know that for sure, you can use A as your answer choice. A means that it is perfect and you can move on. But remember, because we're on a test, in most cases, it's probably going to actually have an error that they want you to correct in some way. Now, our strategy for this, our first strategy of the day, is to actually do these first. Okay, when you see these on the test, make sure you do these first. You're going to do the grammar and punctuation questions first. Why? Because they actually are quicker. Like, you can go through them and knock them out quicker than you would if you had to actually read a whole passage and determine where something goes. Like, for instance, this second style and organization question here, it says, slowly I too gained the confidence needed to solve the problem. Now, your actual question says, which of the following true sentences, if inserted here, they're referencing the where the 15 is, okay? It says, if you were to insert this here, would which one would best conclude the essay and maintain the tone established in the essay? So when they say tone, they mean if the author, it has a feeling of critical, like if the author's being critical, or if the author is being optimistic, okay, or if he's sad, melancholy, it maintain the tone. And so these questions you actually have to do a little slower, like they move a little slower. So I nicknamed them the molasses questions, okay? And these you actually do last. Please do not do them in the opposite order. Unless you're like that avid reader who can just read and you can do it really fast and that's your cup of tea, then go for it. But if it's not, like some of us, make sure that you do the grammar and punctuation questions first, and then you do the style and organization questions last, okay? All right. Now, here's an example of an actual writing section. Now, this here you can see in this passage, you have this passage is about Greek yogurt, but the only one that they're talking about here is we start here at the beginning of the, you start at the beginning here. It says, given these solutions as well as the many health benefits of food, the advantages of Greek yogurt outdo the potential drawbacks of its production. Okay, so they're asking us, should we change this to, should we keep it as outdo, or should we change it to another answer choice? Should we change the word outdo to defeat, outperform, or outweigh? Okay, and so let's just check. If you actually were on the test, you could easily put these in. Greek yogurt defeat. First of all, that would be bad because, the advantages of Greek yogurt defeat. Potential drawbacks, no, I don't think that will work. And so we would get rid of B. The advantages of Greek yogurt outperform the potential drawbacks. Maybe, but we'll see if the advantages of Greek yogurt outweigh, okay, the potential drawbacks. And if I had to choose, I would choose it based on the meaning of the word itself, as well as how it is logically placed in the sentence. And my answer choice would be D. I would choose outweigh here, okay? Because outweigh actually says, that one thing is going to outweigh another thing. Like, it actually has more weight, and that's what outweigh means. Okay, these questions you can do fairly simply, and you don't have to read the entire passage in order to get it. But do remember to start at the very beginning of the sentence, because that's where you want to start. Okay. Okay, in your booklet on page 22, you actually have a full list of punctuation. So I just actually took a picture of your booklet, and here it is. You have a full list of punctuations that are tested on this exam. You have periods, okay, which denote complete sentences, apostrophes that are used for possession as well as contractions, semicolons that are actually interchangeable with periods. They can denote separating two complete sentences that are closely tied in meaning, okay? Colons, there are 3 definitions for colons, okay? And make sure that you're looking for a colon. Usually they show up most often if you have like a list, okay, used to indicate a list. They're also used to introduce a quote, okay? So make sure that you are actually knowing the way that colons are used. Commas, oh my goodness. Commas have 9 uses. So I'm going to leave that up to you. But one of the ones that's really tricky is the one at the bottom. So if you can see number 9. Number 9 says it's used to separate coordinate adjectives. Now, the example that they give here is, in order to get home, we must travel over several narrow, winding, treacherous roads, okay? The words narrow, winding, and treacherous are all adjectives that describe the roads. And so you actually have to separate each adjective with a comma, okay? Dashes are actually interchangeable, okay, with commas, in the fact that in use number 3, used to set off a phrase. So let's look. The use for number 3 says, the example that they use is, Jill, my best friend, has blonde hair. Okay, so if Jill has blonde hair, you don't have to actually use my best friend. My best friend is a modifying phrase that describes Jill. And you can see at the bottom where you have the dash, Jimmy dash, a native of the area dash, expertly knew the local roads. We could simply say Jimmy expertly knew the local roads. We don't need the unnecessary phrase or modifying phrase of a native of the area. But what I want you to note about these 2 examples is that they actually have a comma in the front of the phrase and a comma behind the phrase. So make sure that you have either a comma and a comma or a dash and a dash. You cannot have a comma and a dash, okay? Don't mix them up, Okay, so if you see that, make sure that you know how to use them. All right, so we're just going to play around with a few, okay, to see. Well, actually, later I'll give you punctuation to do on your own in your booklet so that you can actually use these techniques of actually plugging in, well, not plugging in, but actually using the different uses of punctuations. Okay, so let's see if we can go to what most students don't remember, which is subject verb agreement. Okay, subject verb agreement is so important. I can't stress this enough. If you know subject verb agreement, you're in good shape because it takes up about 40% of all of the writing. Okay, now if you know your subject, if your subject is singular, your verb should be singular. And if your subject is plural, then your verb should be plural. So one of the examples that they give here says that the committee votes on matters of policy and administration. Does that even sound right to you? I don't think so. I know for me, it doesn't sound right. So the corrected version here says that the committee votes with an S on matters of policy and administration. That's because our word committee is singular. Even though a committee is comprised of different people, like 13 people, 20 people, you can have a committee of 30 people, it didn't matter. That one committee is actually one, okay, together. So it's a singular noun. More actually, it's a collective noun and it's singular. But if you see anything like that, whether it's jury or amount or audience, each, every, the minute you see those words, okay, you actually need to know that they are singular. And so our singular subjects have singular verbs. And the funny thing about singular verbs is that they end in S. Okay, so if you see a verb that ends in S, that means that it is singular. Okay, dances, the singer sings, the dancer dances, the doctor operates with an S. Okay, all right. The other thing that you need to remember about collective nouns, okay, is that if you see a country, the name of a country, and it ends in S, that means that it's actually singular because countries are singular, even though they make up, you know, a whole land mass of millions of people, it's actually singular. Okay, so if you see a country that ends in S, like ours, United States, okay, it ends in S. You would say the United States are a cool country to live in. That wouldn't work, right? Not that I feel any way about the United States right now, but what I mean by that is that you wouldn't use the verb are, which is plural, to denote the United States, which is singular. So you can't have a singular verb with a plural verb with a singular noun. So make sure that if your subject is singular, your verb should be singular. And if it is a collective noun, that you actually have it. So in your booklet, you have examples of collective nouns. I put that there so that you can reference it later when you're doing your work, okay? Now, the other thing you want to remember is that if you have the words either or neither nor, they actually have a special case, okay? So neither those cats nor the dog run very quickly. And I'm down here under here, I'm circling it on the screen. I hope you can see that. The incorrect example is neither those cats nor the dog run very quickly. The reason that is actually incorrect is because when you deal with neither nor and either or, you want to make sure that the verb agrees with whichever subject is closest to it. Right now, the subject closest to it is dog. The dog. The dog is singular, okay? Therefore, the verb should be runs. So it should read that the dog runs very quickly, okay? So neither the cat nor the dog runs very quickly with an S, okay? So we're gonna put these to the test in real time. Let's check, see what we have. All right, so in your booklet, you have verb agreement drill, okay? So go to that page. It's just the next one that you're using. The Netherlands were part of a band of countries that signed the Treaty of Rome. Is there an error there? And I'll just give you a hint. Yes, everything on this page has an error, okay? So your job is to be able to find it. So let's see. Netherlands is a country that is an S. Should its verb be were? Let's see. When you are on the test, I want you to identify the subject, the simple subject, and the verb in the sentence. Here, the simple subject is Netherlands. The simple verb is were. Would you say Netherlands were? Okay, let's see if it works. In this case, we actually need to, what did we say before? If your subject is singular, then your verb should be singular. Therefore, we're going to cross out were and make it was. So even though it may not sound correct to you, it's actually right. The Netherlands was part of the bands of countries that signed the Treaty of Rome. Okay, that's because Netherlands is singular, a collective noun, and was is actually a singular verb. Our next one, the newly elected president, to the dismay of her opponents, have argued to phase out the electoral college. Here's a special case where I'm going to give you a hint. If you ever see the modifying phrase that's separated with the two commas, I want you to do this. Boop, scratch right through it, okay? Any prepositional phrase, that means a phrase that starts with a preposition, okay? And any modifying phrase, you can get rid of it. Now we actually see our subject and it goes directly to our verb. So now it reads, the newly elected president has argued to phase out the electoral college. Does that sound right to you? Well, if it does, then I want you to not so much rely on your ear, but look at the actual sentence. President is singular, have is plural. So the verb have should be scratched out and we should change it to has. So now it should say the newly elected president has argued to phase out the electoral college. Okay, so that one was tricky. Okay, let's look at number 3, 4, and 5. Neither my grandparents nor my mother liked or likes rap music. Let's take a look. We're using that neither nor or either or principle, and we have to remember that the verb we choose, it depends on the subject that is closest to it. So right now, my mother is the subject closest to it, okay? Here, you're going to actually choose, I want to say mother. Is mother singular or plural? Okay. In this case, mother is singular because there's only one, right? Okay, therefore our verb should be singular. And it is. If we choose likes, likes actually denotes a singular verb. Okay, let's try this one. A witty, rapid-fire freestyle ability and a lyrically complex rhyming style explains or explain why Christopher Wallace is arguably one of the greatest freestyle rappers of all time. Now, if you don't know who Christopher Wallace is, I'll have you do your research on your own. Okay, so I'm dating myself, of course. Here, we actually have a compound subject, ability and style. The minute you see and, you should automatically know that it's going to be plural, okay? So we don't even have to look at that. In this case, plural, that means that you should choose the verb that does not have an S. So you should have explains. Ability and style, explain why Christopher Wallace is arguably one of the greatest freestyle rappers of all time, okay? Now, of course, that could be my opinion. You may not agree, but hey, the sentence is correct, okay? An easy to understand yet complex flow, all right, was the trademark or were the trademarks? Okay, in this case, we're actually going to use our subject, which is flow. Always find the simple subject. Remember, simple subject doesn't have all the fluff, okay? All the adjectives and adverbs connected. You just want the actual subject, the noun. Flow is the noun here, okay? And so flow is actually singular. So our verb should be was, okay? An easy to understand yet complex flow was the trademark. Okay, so there you go. So these are just a few drills to show you how to use this process for the actual assignment that you have. Later on, you'll have 10 minutes in order to actually do the work in your booklet, and I will show you the answers afterward. Okay, so let's check. Here is a molasses question. Now, earlier, I remember I told you the order you should do your writing questions. The first ones are the grammar and punctuation. You do those first. And then second, after you do those, you come back and you do these. These are the argument organization questions. Argument organization is actually just what it is. You are arguing, okay, the actual organization of the passage. This is a technique that you probably used to use in elementary school, but they haven't mentioned it to you again. And they actually want to test you on it now that you're in the 11th, 10th grade, okay? So we're actually doing number 3. As you can see, number 3 here says, for the sake of logic and coherence, sentence 3 should be placed where? Sentence 3 is actually, don't get it confused, okay? Sentence 3 is actually in the bracket of 3, where it says, at her job, my aunt's fellow workers and acquaintances benefit from her advice, okay? So I'll just simply read this and we'll see if it flows the way it does, okay? Her job, I'll start with number 1. Her job requires her to go to social events, and sometimes I go with her. I have watched her at dinner. Her eyes remain set on whoever is speaking, and she makes a note of every detail. At her job, my aunt's fellow workers and acquaintances benefit from her advice. My aunt then demonstrates what a true counselor should be by giving advice that is helpful and beneficial. Similarly, we make our friends. Okay, now we have to see whether sentence 3 in the brackets should actually go A or stay where it is right now. So A is almost like there's no error. It should stay where it is. The way it flows, though, I don't think it should stay where it is, okay? B says it should go before sentence 1. So that means we're going to move 3 all the way up to 1, okay? C says it should go before sentence 2, okay? So we will move 3 all the way in front of sentence 2, leaving sentence 1 where it is. And then choice D says after sentence 4. Now, I don't know if you noticed this, but sentence 3 has a transition, okay? A transition phrase. At her job. Okay. At her job, my aunt's fellow workers and acquaintances benefit from her advice. Okay. Not sure what you think should go there, but okay, if I was on the exam, it would be B, before sentence 1. Notice that if you were to read it the way it is now, that we've chosen chose where to move sentence 3 in front of sentence 1, it actually flows a little better. At her job, my aunt's fellow workers and acquaintances benefit from her advice. Her job requires her to go to social events, and sometimes I go with her. I have watched her at dinner. Her eyes remain set on whomever is speaking, and she makes a note of every detail. My aunt then demonstrates what a true counselor should be by giving advice that is helpful and beneficial. Similarly, we make our friends. Bam. If I was on the test, that actually makes sense to me. If you ever have a transitional phrase in the middle of a paragraph, make sure that you actually move it so that it makes sense to open up a paragraph. Most times it does, okay? So that's just one technique. That's good. So for argument organization questions, make sure that you are putting them in the flow of sequence that makes more sense to you, okay? Next up, argument logic. Okay, now another set of molasses questions are argument logic questions. Argument logic questions, they actually want you to use your logic, okay, in terms of determining what something should be. So in this case, number 2 says, which of the following true statements, if added here, here meaning where the 2 is, okay? Where the 2 in the box is, okay? If added here, which of these statements would best strengthen the assertion that many people ask Aunt Anna for advice? Okay, if you haven't noticed, excuse me, we actually have, we're still talking about Aunt Anna from our previous passage, but here we actually are wondering which of these sentences would strengthen our assertion. So I want you to see that. Strengthen our assertion. If you ever are on the test and you see an argument logic question, underline what they want, okay? They want you to find a phrase that strengthens, beefs up, makes stronger the assertion, right? That people come to Aunt Anna for advice. The choices are A, even my brother takes his problems to her more readily than he does our parents. B says, sometimes Aunt Anna asks for my advice. C, lately, Aunt Anna has encouraged us to try to find our own answers to our problems. And D, she always gives appropriate and helpful advice. Okay, now, if I had to put these in order, right? A is a strong contender. One, because even my brother, that statement says a lot, okay? It's like, even my brother, and he doesn't go to anybody. He, goes to Aunt Anna. B says, sometimes Aunt Anna asks for my advice. That does not strengthen the assertion that people go to her. It's actually her going to you, okay? So eliminate B. C, lately, Aunt Anna has encouraged us to try to find our own answers. So why do we even go to Aunt Anna if she's not giving advice? So we would get rid of C. And D says she always gives appropriate and helpful advice. Okay, now, if I had to choose between A and D, Which one of these would actually strengthen, okay, make stronger, right, or build up the assertion that people go to her? I'll let you put that in the chat. Let's see what our answer is. Let you put that in. Okay. Our answer is A. Even my own brother takes his problems to her more readily than he does to our parents. Okay. So he doesn't go to his parents for advice all the time. He goes to Aunt Anna. All right. Very good. Good job, you all. Number 3 says, the writer is considering deleting the underlined sentence. Should the writer make this deletion? All right, now when they ask you a question like this is very, very key, so listen carefully, okay? Notice how the answer choices 2 are yes and 2 are no. So A and B will always be yes, and C and D will always be no. But let's see what we're dealing with. Now, you have this whole passage. It starts with my Aunt Anna. It's truly amazing aptitude, right? The skill to advise people well, blah, blah, blah. Now, we're talking about Aunt Anna. Down, this underlying statement says, my friend Stephanie says that her family is so busy that no one is ever home. Really? What does that have to do with Aunt Anna's amazing aptitude? Nothing. So I am going to say we're going to actually delete this. Now, that would mean that we're going to choose between A and B, okay? And I'm going to say A because A says, yes, you should delete it because the sentence doesn't further the writer's point about her aunt. B actually states yes because the sentence undermines the writer's point that people are too busy to help. Now, the author wasn't even asking whether people were too busy to help. So that would not be true. So when you're dealing with argument logic questions and you actually have a choice to delete something or insert something, make sure that you scratch out the ones you're not going to use. So in this case, we would have scratched out C and D immediately so that it would only leave A or B. Okay, so now you get to show your stuff. Okay, grammar rules. All right, how they are tested. So here you have verbs. They are always tested on whether they agree and if you have the verbs in the right tense. So you need to remember, look for present tense, past tense, as well as future tense when you are looking for verbs. So not only if the subject and verb agree, but if the tense agrees, okay? With pronouns, make sure if you have Jonathan as your subject in one sentence, make sure the next sentence says he, okay? Make sure your pronoun agrees with the noun, okay, that is working with, or the antecedent. Adjectives and adverbs, make sure they're placed where they are, and they're always testing to see whether you're confusing the two, so be careful. When you are comparing on the test, make sure you have the correct comparisons and parallelism. Parallelism just simply states that if you have 3 things that you're listing, all 3 of those things need to be the same, okay? Or in the same form. Punctuation, make sure you stop versus go. So in this case, if you're pausing, okay, make sure that you have a comma. If you're going through a statement, make sure that there are no commas, okay, or no punctuations to get rid of that. And list the same thing, parallelism, okay? So we're going to give you time to put those things to the test. In your booklet, okay, you actually have punctuation practice. Okay, they're actually questions. So we're going to give you 10 minutes now to actually go through and do these questions. Okay, I want you to find those in your packet, make sure that you do them, and I'll give you time. We're going to set up a timer for you to do that so that you have the time to go ahead and do your problems. And then at the end of that 10 minutes, we're going to give you the answers. Okay? You may begin. Okay, now remember, for this section, you want to make sure that you are putting your answers in the chat. Okay? And I will give you a 5-minute warning the same way that they do on the test. That way you can either use your letter of the day or you can quickly go to the ones that you feel you can do faster. And if you have any questions, ask those too. Remember, our Butterfly Works team is on board so that we can answer those questions for you if you have any. Remember to put your numbers beside your answers too. So for number 1, for instance, if you're choosing D, make sure that you put number 1 and D in the chat so we know which questions you are answering. Keep them coming. We see your answers coming through in the chat. Remember, if you have any questions, you can put those in as well. Okay, and for those of you who just want to put in all of your answers once you've actually done them, you can do that as well. I'll let you know how much time you have left. Okay, 5 more minutes. Excellent work, you all. I see you working diligently. Wish I could be there to peep at your answers to see if you're actually doing them in order of easiest. Remember, now, later, never applies to every section of the test. So do the easy ones first. Alrighty, time is up for you. Okay, so you have 10 minutes to go over them. Put in your last minute questions, or I should say answer choices. Okay, so for this, I want you to see the answers to these questions, and we're just gonna go over them. Where I'm just going to give you the answers so that you know whether you got them right or wrong. And remember, always be ready to stay tuned to the very end because we're giving gift cards electronically to those who are actually doing the work and participating. All right, so number one, okay, here you have the evaporation is the transformation of matter, most commonly liquid water, from a liquid to a gaseous state. Okay, the answer to number one is C. You need to make sure that your modifying phrase, most commonly liquid water, is actually separated by two commas or two dashes, one comma in the front and one comma in the back of your modifying phrase. For number two, underlined here, let's see, the 5th century BC, a period of cultural, artistic, and philosophical growth in Athens. The answer should be A. There's nothing wrong with that statement. So I hope you saw that the commas are actually separating the list. You have cultural, artistic, and philosophical. They're actually there. You do not need a comma after growth, okay? All right, number three. This is a good one. Number three is actually almost like the sidebar conversation. It's like, I really hope Cheryl comes to the party tonight, but not in that red sweater. Okay, so for this one, if I was to put my hand up and say a little sidebar conversation inside of my own sentence, the answer here should be C. If not in our own, seems likely, I find. So if you have that, make sure that you give yourself credit for that. Number four, like the Chinese, the Mayans occasionally decorated their buildings. Okay, so here the answer is A. There's nothing wrong with that. Like the Chinese, the Mayans occasionally decorated. The only transitional phrase is like the Chinese, okay? So you're describing the Mayans in relationship or comparing them to the Chinese. Number five, let's see. The carvings were placed on broad murals and ramps along stairs, as well as in the fronts of the immensely elaborate entrances. Now, if this underlined portion did not have a comma in between immensely and elaborate, it would be correct. But since it does, there is an error here. Immensely is an adverb, okay, describing elaborate. And so you actually do not need a comma. So the only way to correct that is to change both of them to adjectives. And that's what C does, immense and elaborate. Okay. All right, cool. So let's go to number 6. Here you have the American bison, an animal that typically symbolizes the Wild West, is actually the heaviest land mammal in North America. This statement has a modifying phrase within it, and you have to make sure that that phrase is completely outlined, one comma in the front, one comma in the back, and the answer here is D. Bison, an animal that typically symbolizes the Wild West, okay? You could actually get rid of that, okay, that statement, and you'll see that if you can, that's a modifying phrase. You should have a comma in the front and one in the back. Number 7, okay? Today, comma, however, comma, many woodcutters recognize the harm such practices cause. So this is actually an example of a transitional phrase. Today, however, however is a transition showing you that there's a contrast between this statement and the previous one, okay? And the answer here is A. There is no change here. If there was however by itself, you'd have one comma. Since you have today, however, there needs to be two commas surrounding however. And our last but not least, okay, attempt at this Punctuation practice is the last one. With today's cloning technology, it's conceivable that a woolly mammoth's DNA could be injected into a living cell. Now, be careful. IT apostrophe S actually stands for it is. So make sure that you have it is and you say it is if you actually see the contraction. If you have ITS, that is it's, but it's actually possessive. Making note of the possessive of whatever it's referring to. So here you have two. The answer here is C. It is conceivable that a woolly mammoth's DNA, meaning a woolly mammoth, that's the clue there. There's one woolly mammoth and you're talking about its DNA. So it needs to have an apostrophe there. So there you go. You have your answers. Make sure that you acknowledge those answers by putting them in your booklet, okay? And congratulations to those who actually got the majority of the 8 right, okay? Good job to you. All right, so we're actually going to take another 5-minute break to get some sunshine. Make sure that you get up and stretch. Remember, this is also a test taking technique. Make sure that you get up out of that chair and actually stretch your legs. That way you can get your blood circulating, okay? This test is long, 3 hours and 50 minutes. It's not a game. You want to get up. All right, thank you.